What if a single act of kindness could change your life forever? Ethan Carter, a struggling single dad, never expected his world to shift the night he found a terrified little girl standing alone in the rain. She had bruises on her wrists, fear in her eyes, and a secret that would lead him to one of the most powerful women in the city, a billionaire grandmother desperate to bring her runaway granddaughter home. But love isn't about wealth or power. It's about trust, sacrifice, and choosing the family you want to fight for. As Ethan steps into a battle he never saw coming, he finds himself at odds with a woman who sees him as nothing more than an obstacle. Yet, as secrets unravel and unexpected, bonds form. Both Ethan and Margaret must confront the truth. Sometimes the most unlikely people become the family you never knew you needed. This is a story of love, redemption, and second chances, where a runaway girl, a struggling father, and a billionaire grandmother learn that home isn't built with money. It's built with love. If you believe in the power of family, in stories that touch the heart and make you rethink what truly matters in life, then stick around, because this journey is one you won't want to miss. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single moment of this unforgettable story. Now let's begin. A struggling single dad saved a runaway girl and found love in her billionaire grandmother's arms. The late evening sky was dark and heavy with rain. A bitter wind howled through the deserted streets, rattling loose window panes and sending puddles rippling with each icy gust. Ethan Carter, bundled in a threadbare jacket, shoved his hands into his pockets as he trudged home from yet another grueling shift at Joe's coffee house. His shoulders ached, his feet were sore, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Tonight had been especially difficult. The evening rush had been relentless, and his tips had barely covered the cost of groceries for the week. Nathan, his 6-year-old son, would be waiting for him at home with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Tanner. He hated having to rely on her so often, but childcare wasn't cheap, and his income barely stretched enough to keep them afloat. He turned the corner onto the quiet alley leading to his apartment when something caught his eye. A small figure huddled beside the cafe's entrance. At first, he thought it was just another pile of discarded blankets left behind by a vagrant, but as he stepped closer, he realized it was a child. A little girl, no older than 10, sat curled up against the brick wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands, half covering her pale face. The dim glow of the street lamp cast long shadows across her tiny frame, and the way she shivered sent a jolt of concern through Ethan. The cold rain had soaked through her thin clothing, and her lips were slightly blue. "Hey, kid," he said gently, crouching down to her level. "You okay?" The girl flinched at his voice, her wide eyes darting toward him with a mixture of fear and suspicion. Large, expressive brown eyes, haunted, guarded. Ethan had seen that look before. It was the kind of look that came from fear, from experience. She didn't answer. She only pulled her knees tighter against her chest. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't exactly in a position to help someone else. His own life was barely stitched together. But leaving a child alone on the streets in this weather, that wasn't something he could stomach. He shifted his weight, noting the faint bruises on her wrist, the way she instinctively recoiled from him, as if expecting harm. His gut twisted. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but you can't. Stay out here, it's freezing." Still, silence. "Are you lost?" He tried again. "Do you need me to call someone?" That got a reaction. The girl's head snapped up, and for the first time she spoke, a barely audible whisper. "No, please, no." Ethan frowned. He knew fear when he saw it, and this girl was terrified. "All right," he said, exhaling. "How about this? I work at that cafe right there." He gestured toward Joe's coffee house, where the scent of roasted beans still lingered in the air. "How about I get you something warm to eat? No pressure, no questions, just food. The girl hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Okay, Ethan murmured, offering his hand. She didn't take it, but she stood, wobbling slightly on her thin legs before following him inside. The cafe was empty now, save for the faint hum of the espresso machine and the lingering warmth from the ovens. Ethan guided her to a booth near the back, away from the large front windows. He grabbed a grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of hot cocoa, setting them in front of her. "Eat," he said simply. For a moment she only stared. Then, slowly, she reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked up the sandwich. The first bite was small, tentative, but as soon as the warmth hit her tongue, she devoured the rest with a hunger that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Been a while since you ate, huh?" he asked softly. The girl didn't respond, just kept eating. He let her be for a moment, then said, "What's your name?" A pause, then finally a quiet reply. "Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Ethan." No reaction. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Lily froze mid-bite, her fingers clenching around the crust of the sandwich. After a long silence, she shook her head, barely perceptible but definite. Ethan exhaled. He had no idea what kind of trouble she was running from, but his instincts screamed that it was something serious. The bruises, the fear, the way she avoided eye contact whenever he asked about her family. And that terrified whisper, "No. Please." "No." He rubbed a hand over his face. He should call someone, the police, child services, but something about the way Lily sat there, fragile and alone, made his stomach knot. She didn't need another system. She needed someone who wouldn't fail her, someone like him. Ethan sighed, then made a decision. "All right, kid. Looks like you're staying with me for now." As the words left his mouth, he felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He barely had enough to keep himself and Nathan afloat, but looking at Lily, scared, shivering, alone, he knew he couldn't turn his back. Lily's fingers tightened slightly around the cup of cocoa. She didn't say anything, but for the first time, she didn't look quite as afraid. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, for the first time in a long while, Lily felt the faintest sense of warmth. Ethan unlocked the door to his modest apartment, stepping aside to let Lily in. She hesitated, lingering at the threshold, as though unsure if she truly belonged there. Nathan was already asleep in his tiny room, oblivious to the visitor his father had brought home. "Go ahead," Ethan encouraged. "It's warmer inside." Lily took a small step forward, her eyes scanning the dimly lit space cautiously. The apartment was small, cluttered, but lived in. A couch with a faded blanket draped over the back, a scratched coffee table stacked with unopened bills, and a kitchen with mismatched cabinets. It wasn't much, but it was home. Ethan turned on the heater and gestured toward the couch. "You can sit if you want. I'll grab you some dry clothes." She nodded but didn't move. Instead, her gaze flickered to the small framed drawing on the wall. A child's sketch of a smiling man and a boy holding hands, the words, "Me and Dad," scrawled beneath it in crayon. "That's Nathan's," Ethan said softly, following her eyes. "My son, he's 6. Lily's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she remained silent. Ethan disappeared into his bedroom, rummaging through a drawer until he found an old hoodie and a pair of sweatpants. He returned and handed them to her. "These might be a bit big, but they're warm." She hesitated before taking them. "Thank you," Ethan nodded, then pointed down the hall. "Bathroom's just there. Take your time." While she changed, Ethan sat on the couch, rubbing a hand over his face. He still wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into. This girl, Lily, she was scared of something or someone, and he had a feeling she wasn't being entirely honest about where she had come from. When she emerged, the oversized hoodie swallowed her small frame, but she looked visibly more comfortable. She sat stiffly on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan could see she wasn't used to being in unfamiliar places. "So," he said, sitting across from her, "Lily, do you want to tell me what happened? Why were you out there alone?" She shook her head almost immediately. I can't go back." Ethan studied her carefully. "Is someone looking for you?" A flicker of something, fear, maybe, crossed her face. "I don't know." He didn't push. He knew what it was like to carry things you weren't ready to talk about. Instead, he offered her a peanut butter sandwich and some water, which she accepted with quiet gratitude. As she ate, he noticed something odd, the way she held the sandwich, delicate, practiced like someone who had been taught fine dining etiquette. And then there was the way she sat, straight-backed, almost rigid, her posture too perfect for a child who had supposedly been living on the streets. Ethan frowned. "You from around here?" Lily hesitated before answering. "No." "Where then?" Again, a pause. "Far." Ethan leaned forward slightly, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. "You know, you don't have to tell me everything, but if you need help, I don't," she interrupted quickly, then looked down. "I mean, I'll be fine." Ethan wasn't convinced, but he let it go for now. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All right, you can sleep here tonight. We'll figure things out in the morning." Lily's expression softened, relief flickering across her features. "Okay." Ethan grabbed an extra blanket and pillow, setting them up on the couch. "It's not the best, but it's warm." "It's perfect," she murmured, pulling the blanket around herself like a shield. For the first time that night, she seemed to relax, even if just a little. Ethan sat in the armchair across from her for a moment, studying her. "You remind me of someone," he said after a while, more to himself than to her. Lily looked up. "Who?" Ethan hesitated, then gave her a small smile. "Someone who thought they had to fight everything alone." She didn't respond, but her eyes held something different now, curiosity perhaps, or recognition. He finally stood. "Get some rest, okay?" As Ethan turned off the lights and retreated to his own room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something much bigger than he realized, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, but inside, for the first time in a long while, Lily felt the faintest sense of safety. Margaret Bennett stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse office, staring out over the city skyline. The flickering lights of Manhattan stretched endlessly before her, but her mind was focused on only one thing. Lily was missing. Satu, normally composed, steel-nerved businesswoman, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: panic. She was a woman accustomed to control, to making precise decisions that shaped industries, but now she had lost control of the one thing that truly mattered. Behind her, Samuel Pierce, her trusted assistant, cleared his throat. "We have our first lead," he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. Margaret turned swiftly, her sharp green eyes locking onto him. "Where is she?" Samuel held out a manila folder. "One of our investigators traced her movements last night. She was seen near a small cafe, Joe's Coffee House, in the Lower East Side. A man took her in." Margaret snatched the file, flipping it open. A grainy security photo showed Lily standing outside in the rain. Her face was barely visible, but it was unmistakably her. Margaret's stomach twisted at the sight. "And this man?" she demanded. Samuel hesitated. "We're still running a background check. His name is Ethan Carter, 34, single father, works as a barista at the cafe." Margaret's brow furrowed. A barista? Why would Lily be with someone like that? Her mind instantly leaped to the worst conclusion. Kidnapping, exploitation. "He's not a known criminal," Samuel continued, reading her thoughts. "No record, just struggling financially, raising a child on his own." Margaret pressed her lips into a thin line. "Struggling people make desperate decisions." Samuel nodded. We're investigating further, but so far no indication that he's harmed her. Margaret's fingers tightened around the file. I want everything on this man, his address, his financials, his employment history. If he so much as has an unpaid parking ticket, I want to know about it. Yes, ma'am. Margaret exhaled, sharply, turning back toward the window. Why would Lily run? Had she failed her granddaughter so completely that the child would rather take her chances on the streets than stay under her care? She had thought giving Lily every comfort would be enough. Private tutors, a lavish home, the best doctors and security. But now, looking at the empty space where her granddaughter should have been, she wondered if she had been giving Lily everything, except what she actually needed. Samuel's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Would you like me to notify the authorities? Margaret hesitated. She had always believed in handling things on her own terms. If the police became involved too soon, they would treat this as a standard missing persons case, asking questions that might lead to dead ends. No, she needed control over the situation. Not yet, she finally said. Samuel arched a brow. Ma'am, Margaret turned, her expression unreadable. If we involve the police now, they'll handle this on their terms. I want to handle this on mine. If Ethan Carter knows where she is, I will be the one to retrieve her. Samuel studied her for a long moment before nodding. Understood. I'll have a car ready within the hour. Margaret walked over to her desk and sat down, running a hand over her forehead. The memory of her daughter, Caroline, flashed in her mind. How she had also once run away from her, desperate to escape the suffocating walls of their family's wealth and expectations. Margaret had thought she was doing what was best, protecting her child from the world, but in the end, she had only pushed her further away. Now history was repeating itself. First her daughter, and now Lily. She swallowed the lump in her throat, pushing the emotion down. There was no time for weakness. Now, Lily needed her. Whether the girl realized it or not, Margaret was going to bring her home, where she belonged, her hands clenched into fists. Find me everything on Ethan Carter, his entire life story. If he's taken Lily for his own reasons, I want to know. And them, Samuel nodded. I'll make sure we have a full report by morning. Margaret glanced once more at the photo of Lily, her throat tightening. I will find you, sweetheart. And when I do, I'll make sure you never run again. As Samuel left the office to make arrangements, Margaret leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Outside, the city continued its restless hum, oblivious to the storm brewing within one of its most powerful women. The steady hum of the cafe's espresso machine filled the quiet morning air, blending with the occasional clatter of dishes. Ethan wiped down the counter, his mind elsewhere. Lily had barely spoken since last night, only offering short, cautious replies whenever he tried to engage her. He didn't want to pry, but something about the bruises on her wrist and the wary way she flinched at loud noises unsettled him. He glanced toward the small corner booth where she sat, stirring a cup of cocoa absent-mindedly. Her dark eyes flickered up to meet his, then quickly dropped back down. Ethan sighed. He wasn't good at this. Parenting his own kid was hard enough. Now he had a frightened runaway under his roof. The jingling bell above the door signaled a new customer. Ethan barely looked up until he sensed the shift in the room. A commanding presence had just entered, one that demanded attention without a word. Margaret Bennett stood in the doorway, dressed in an elegant dark coat. Her posture, straight as steel, her piercing green eyes scanned the cafe, sharp and calculating. She was not a woman used to waiting, nor was she the type to frequent a modest coffee shop like this. Samuel Pierce followed closely behind, his usual professional detachment in place, though Ethan detected a trace of something else in his expression, anticipation. Ethan put down the towel and straightened. He didn't know why, but every instinct in his body told him this woman wasn't here for coffee. Margaret's gaze settled on him. "Mr. Carter." The way she said his name made it clear she already knew the answer. Ethan wiped his hands on his apron, nodding warily. "Yeah, can I help you?" She stepped forward, placing a sleek black leather handbag on the counter. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Ethan's stomach tightened. He didn't need to ask what she meant. Lily, the little girl, must have sensed the shift in energy, because at that moment, she slid off her seat and hurried to stand beside Ethan, clutching his sleeve tightly. The moment Margaret saw her, something flickered across her face, relief followed by restrained anger. "Lily." Margaret's voice softened, but there was still an unmistakable air of authority behind it. "Come here." Lily's grip on. Ethan's sleeve only tightened. She didn't move. Ethan took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Look, I don't know who you are, but I am Margaret Bennett," she interrupted, lifting her chin. "Lily's grandmother." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "A billionaire? What the hell was a kid like Lily doing out on the streets if she had family like this?" Margaret turned her gaze to Lily again. "You've had your little adventure. It's time to go home now." Lily shook her head violently, stepping even closer to Ethan. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Lily, that's enough." Ethan folded his arms. "She's scared," he said bluntly. "Maybe instead of ordering her around, you should ask why." Margaret's nostrils flared slightly. "I am not in the habit of justifying myself to strangers, Mr. Carter." Ethan didn't flinch. "Then I guess we have a problem." Silence stretched between them. Samuel cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, I assure you this is just a misunderstanding. Miss Bennett has been looking for Lily all night. She was worried sick." Lily's voice, small but firm, cut through the tension. "No, she wasn't." Margaret stiffened. Ethan glanced down at the girl. Her face was pale but resolute. Margaret inhaled deeply, as if reining in her frustration. "Lily, we can talk about this at home." "No." Lily's voice cracked. "You don't listen. You never listen." Ethan had seen a lot of things in his life: anger, desperation, grief, but the look on Margaret Bennett's face right now was something else entirely. She looked wounded. Margaret turned to Ethan, her voice lower. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me," he shot back, "because right now all I see is a scared kid who doesn't want to go with you." Samuel stepped forward. "Lily is under Miss Bennett's legal guardianship. If you refuse to return her, this could become a legal matter." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Legal or not, I'm not handing her over just because you say so." Margaret's expression hardened. "Then I'll give you until tomorrow morning to reconsider." She turned on her heel, leaving the cafe without another word, Samuel following behind. Ethan let out a slow breath, glancing down at Lily. "All right, kid," he muttered. "Looks like we just made things complicated." Lily didn't say anything, but the way she clung to his arm told him she wasn't ready to let go. As Ethan watched the cafe door swing shut, his mind raced. Margaret Bennett wasn't going to give up easily. He could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just about taking Lily home. There was something deeper, something unspoken that lingered between the lines. He had a feeling that by morning, things were going to get a whole lot worse. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts circling like vultures. Margaret Bennett wasn't the type of woman to issue empty threats. She had given him until morning to reconsider. What the hell was he supposed to do? A soft rustling noise pulled him from his thoughts. He turned his head slightly and saw Lily curled up in the armchair across from him, hugging a pillow tightly against her chest. She wasn't asleep either. Her wide, cautious eyes watched him through the dim light of the street lamp outside. "You okay?" Ethan asked quietly. She hesitated, then shook her head. "She's not going to leave me alone." Ethan exhaled. "No, I don't think she is." Lily's fingers tightened on the fabric of the pillow. I don't want to go back. Ethan sat up, resting his elbows on his knees. Lily, I need you to be honest with me. Why did you run away? Lily hesitated again. She doesn't love me, she finally whispered. She never has. Ethan frowned. That's a strong thing to say. Lily looked down at her hands. She cares about her company, her money, the way people see her, but not me. Her voice wavered, but she swallowed hard, refusing to let herself cry. I was just another thing she controlled. Ethan rubbed his jaw. He didn't know Margaret Bennett well enough to judge whether Lily's words were entirely true, but he could feel the pain in them, the kind of pain that wasn't fabricated. She truly believed what she was saying. She's your family, though, Ethan said gently. She's worried about you. Lily laughed bitterly. She's worried about what people will say if they find out I ran away. Ethan had no argument against that. It made too much sense. A woman like Margaret Bennett would be more concerned with her image than the reasons behind Lily's actions. A sudden knock at the door startled them both. Ethan's body tensed instinctively. It was too early for it to be anyone else. Lily's face drained of color. She knew. Ethan got up slowly, motioning for Lily to stay put. He approached the door, peering through the peephole, his jaw tightened. Samuel Pierce. Ethan unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. It's early, he said flatly. Samuel's face remained unreadable. Miss Bennett would like to speak with you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Right now? She doesn't. Like waiting, Samuel replied. She's in the car downstairs. Ethan glanced back at Lily, who had retreated to the farthest corner of the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. He turned back to Samuel. Not happening. Samuel sighed. Ethan, this doesn't need to escalate. Let's be reasonable. Ethan let out a humorless chuckle. Reasonable? You show up at my place at sunrise and expect me to hand over a terrified kid without asking questions? Yeah, that sounds real reasonable. Samuel's lips pressed into a thin line. Miss Bennett is prepared to take legal action. Ethan's temper flared. Yeah, let her. But I'm not handing over Lily until I know she's actually safe with her. Samuel hesitated, studying Ethan closely. Then, with a small nod, he stepped back. You should come down, talk to her, hear her side. Ethan exhaled sharply. He didn't trust Margaret, but he wasn't an idiot. If he refused to engage, she'd use her wealth and power to make this a legal nightmare. He turned back to Lily. Stay here, okay? Lily looked terrified. You're coming back? Ethan knelt beside her. Promise. She nodded hesitantly. Ethan followed Samuel downstairs. The black luxury car was parked at the curb, the tinted windows making it impossible to see inside. Samuel opened the door for him. Ethan hesitated only for a second before sliding in. Margaret sat elegantly across from him in the spacious back seat, dressed in another perfectly tailored coat. She regarded him coolly. Mr. Carter, she greeted. Ethan folded his arms. Margaret. She raised an eyebrow. We're on a first-name basis now. You showed up at my house at dawn. I think we skipped past formalities. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but it was gone in an instant. Let's not waste time. Lily needs to come home. Ethan scoffed. Home? She doesn't want to go with you. Margaret's expression darkened slightly. She is a child. She doesn't understand what's best for her. Ethan shook his head. You don't get it, do you? She's scared of you. Margaret's fingers curled slightly around the leather seat. I have done nothing but provide for her. Ethan leaned forward. Providing and parenting are two different things. Margaret exhaled slowly. You don't know me, Mr. Carter. You don't understand the lengths I have gone to for Lily. Ethan studied her. There was something unspoken in her tone, something deep-rooted. He wasn't ready to trust her, but for the first time he saw a flicker of something real in her eyes. Regret, pain. I'm not giving her to you, Ethan said firmly. Not until I know she's safe. Margaret's lips thinned. Then we are at an impasse. Ethan shrugged. Looks like it. She studied him for a long moment, then said, Fine. You want to know if she's safe with me? Then come see for yourself. Ethan blinked. What? Spend the day with us, Margaret said. See her life, her home. If, by the end of the day, you still think she's better off with you, then we'll talk. Ethan narrowed his eyes. A trap or an opportunity? Finally he nodded. Fine. Margaret smiled slightly. Then let's begin. The drive to Margaret Bennett's estate was silent, but heavy with tension. Ethan stared out the tinted windows of the luxury sedan, the towering skyscrapers of the city giving way to quiet, tree-lined streets. The deeper they drove into wealth and privilege, the more out of place he felt. This was not his world. Margaret sat composed across from him, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. Samuel, ever the dutiful assistant, drove in silence. Finally, they reached the estate, a sprawling mansion nestled behind tall wrought-iron gates. The gates opened automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and a marble fountain at the center. Ethan resisted the urge to whistle. This place probably cost more than an entire city block where he lived. The car came to a stop, and Samuel stepped out first, opening the door for Margaret. She exited gracefully, not waiting for Ethan. He climbed out after her, taking in the sheer scale of the property. Welcome to my home, Margaret said, walking toward the grand entrance. Her voice was polite but distant, as if she were speaking to a guest at a formal event rather than the man standing between her and her granddaughter. Ethan followed her inside, his boots sinking into the plush carpet of the grand foyer. A sweeping staircase led to the upper levels, and the walls were adorned with classic paintings, the kind only rich people owned, the ones that looked expensive rather than meaningful. A housekeeper approached, her uniform pristine. Good morning, ma'am. Has everything been prepared? Margaret asked. Yes, ma'am. Breakfast is served in the dining room. Margaret turned to Ethan. Shall we? Ethan followed her into a dining room that was far too large for 3 people. The table was adorned with freshly cut flowers, silverware polished to perfection, and more food than he had seen in a week. Pancakes, eggs, fresh fruit, smoked salmon. It was the kind of spread reserved for the elite. Lily sat at the far end of the table, looking small and out of place in the extravagant setting. She didn't touch her food. Instead, she toyed with the edge of her napkin. Her shoulders hunched. Margaret sat at the head of the table. Eat, Lily, she said, her tone softer than before, but still carrying an air of command. Lily didn't move. Ethan set his hands on the back of a chair. May I? Margaret nodded. Ethan sat beside Lily and reached for a plate. He served himself a pancake and took a bite. Wow, he said. This is way better than the diner down the street. Lily glanced at him but didn't respond. Ethan nudged her plate toward her. Try it. I promise it's not poisoned. Margaret shot him a look, but Lily hesitated, then picked up her fork. As they ate, Ethan observed the subtle tension between grandmother and granddaughter. Margaret was trying, Ethan could see that, but she didn't know how to connect, and Lily, still guarded, refused to make it easy. Finally, Ethan set down his fork. All right, Margaret, he said, wiping his mouth. You wanted me to see her life, so show me. Margaret stood. Very well. She led them through the house, a private library lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a music room with a grand piano, an indoor pool shimmering under skylights. I've given her everything, Margaret said as they walked. Every resource, every opportunity, Ethan frowned. Everything except freedom. Margaret stiffened. She is a child. Children need structure. She's a child who ran away, Ethan countered. That should tell you something. Margaret's lips thinned. You think I don't know that? They reached Lily's bedroom. Margaret opened the door, revealing a princess-like suite, plush bedding, a chandelier, shelves lined with books and toys. But something felt off. It looked more like a showroom than a place where a child actually lived. Lily stood in the doorway, not stepping inside. "This is your room?" Ethan asked. Lily nodded but didn't move. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "It's big," she said finally, "but it's not home." Margaret inhaled sharply. "Lily, I don't want to stay here," Lily whispered. "I never did." Margaret turned to Ethan, her face unreadable. "Well, Mr. Carter, you've seen it. Now tell me, is she better off with you?" Ethan looked at Lily. The answer had never been clearer. Margaret took a slow breath, then turned toward the window, gazing out at the vast estate. "You think I don't love her," she said quietly, "but everything I've built, I built for her." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Love isn't something you build, Margaret. It's something you show." Margaret turned, aback, her green eyes glistening with something close to vulnerability, but only for a second before her composure returned. "She doesn't hate you," Ethan continued. "She just wants to be heard." Margaret studied Lily, who still stood in the doorway, her small shoulders hunched as if bracing for a battle. Finally, Margaret nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe it's time I start listening." Ethan stood in the grand hallway of Margaret Bennett's estate, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as he processed everything he had seen. The sheer luxury, the wealth, the structure. It was all impressive, but none of it felt warm. It didn't feel like home. Lily stood beside him, her small hand curled into a fist at her side. She wasn't looking at him, but he could feel the tension in her tiny frame. She was waiting for him to say something, to decide. Margaret sat in a high-backed chair near the window, watching them both. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words. She had extended the invitation for Ethan to see Lily's world, and now she was waiting for his verdict. "Tell me, Mr. Carter," she finally said, her voice smooth but tinged with exhaustion. "Do you still think she belongs with you?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I think she belongs where she feels safe." Margaret's expression didn't waver, but something flickered in her green eyes. "And you think that's with you?" Lily finally turned, her voice small but firm. "Yes." Margaret inhaled sharply, her fingers tightening slightly around the armrest of her chair. "Lily, I have provided for you. I have given you everything a child could need." "Not everything," Lily interrupted, her voice trembling. "You never gave me you." Silence fell between them. Ethan watched as Margaret's composure cracked, just slightly. A woman who had built an empire, who had commanded boardrooms full of powerful men, suddenly looked lost. "You don't understand, Lily," Margaret said softly. "I was doing what I thought was best for you. But you never asked what I thought was best for me," Lily whispered back. Ethan crossed his arms. "She's right, Margaret. You can't expect a child to feel loved just because you surround her with expensive things. She needs time, attention, someone to tuck her in at night, to ask her about her day, to actually listen." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know how," she admitted finally. "I never did." Lily hesitated, then stepped closer to her grandmother. "Then try." Margaret's breath hitched. The vulnerability in Lily's voice seemed to shake her more than any argument ever could. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not saying you don't care. I think you do. But love isn't just about responsibility, Margaret. It's about choice. And Lily is choosing to be with me." Margaret studied Lily for a long moment. Then with an almost imperceptible nod she turned to Ethan. "And you? Are you willing to take full responsibility for her? To give her the life she deserves?" Ethan met her gaze, unwavering. "Yes." Margaret closed her eyes briefly, as if letting go of something heavy. When she opened them again, she looked tired, but resigned. Then I won't fight you. Lily let out a soft gasp, looking up at her grandmother in shock. You won't? Margaret reached out, brushing a stray curl from Lily's forehead. I love you, Lily, she murmured. And maybe for once, I need to show it by letting you choose. Ethan felt his chest tighten at the sight. This was what Lily had needed all along: acknowledgement, choice, love. Margaret turned to Ethan. I will not remove my presence from her life, she stated firmly. I want to be part of it, in whatever way she will allow. Ethan nodded. That's up to her and you. Margaret exhaled, then stood, smoothing down the front of her dress. Then I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. Lily turned to Ethan, her eyes wide. Can we go now? Ethan glanced at Margaret, who gave a small, sad smile. Go, she said. Be happy, Lily. Lily hesitated. Then, in an unexpected moment, threw her arms around Margaret's waist. Margaret tensed, then slowly, hesitantly, embraced her. Back Ethan gave them a moment before clearing his throat. All right, kid, let's go home. Lily pulled away, her face brighter than he had ever seen it. She took Ethan's hand, and together they walked out of the estate, leaving behind wealth and grandeur in exchange for something far more valuable. A family. As Ethan and Lily drove away, Margaret stood by the window, watching them disappear. Beyond the iron gates, Samuel approached quietly, sensing the weight of the moment. She made her choice, Margaret murmured. Samuel nodded. And so did you. Margaret inhaled deeply. I just hope it was the right one. For the first time in years, she felt something foreign, uncertainty, but deep down she knew that love wasn't about possession. It was about letting go. The drive back to Ethan's apartment was quiet, but this time it was not the heavy silence of uncertainty. It was peaceful. Lily sat beside him in the passenger seat, her hands curled around the seatbelt strap, her gaze fixed on the city passing by. There was something different about her now, a lightness in her shoulders, a steadiness in her breathing. Ethan stole a glance at her. You okay, kid? Lily nodded. Yeah? Then, after a pause, she added, Thank you. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. For what? For not making me go back, she murmured. For listening. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. You're not just some responsibility, Lily. You're a person, and you deserve to be heard. When they pulled up to his apartment complex, the difference between here and Margaret's world was stark. Gone were the towering iron gates, the perfectly manicured hedges, and the grand chandeliers. Instead, there was a simple brick building, a narrow staircase leading up to their unit, and the distant hum of life around them, neighbors arguing, a dog barking, the smell of someone cooking dinner nearby. Lily stepped out of the car and looked around. She didn't hesitate this time. She walked toward the door, and Ethan followed. Inside, Nathan was already awake, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he stumbled into the living room. When he saw Lily, he grinned. You're back! Lily blinked in surprise. You noticed I was gone, Nathan scoffed. Duh! You left your drawing book on the couch. Lily stared at him for a moment, then let out a small laugh. It was the first real laugh Ethan had heard from her since the day they met. Ethan tousled Nathan's hair. All right, you two, breakfast? Nathan cheered, running to the kitchen while Lily hesitated. Can I help? Ethan raised an eyebrow. You want to help me make the world's most amazing pancakes? Lily nodded eagerly as they worked together, cracking eggs, mixing batter, and flipping pancakes. Something warm settled in Ethan's chest. This wasn't just about taking care of Lily. This was about being a family. They sat at the small kitchen table, the smell of syrup and butter filling the room. Nathan talked excitedly about his dreams from the night before, and for the first time, Lily didn't just listen. She joined in. She talked about the things she wanted to do, the places she wanted to see. She sounded like a child again. After breakfast, Lily and Nathan sprawled out on the floor, flipping through her sketchbook. Nathan watched in awe as she sketched, her pencil strokes confident and quick. "You're really good," he murmured. "Can you teach me?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to listen." Ethan watched from the couch, a cup of coffee in hand. This is what she needed: stability, belonging. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He set his cup down and opened the door, surprised to see Margaret standing there. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Margaret cleared her throat. "May I come in?" Ethan stepped aside and she entered, her eyes scanning the small apartment. It was a far cry from her estate, but she didn't comment on it. Instead, she looked toward the living room, where Lily and Nathan were laughing over a silly drawing. Margaret's lips twitched slightly. "She looks happy." Ethan nodded. "She is." Margaret turned to face him. "I meant what I said. I want to be part of her life, on her terms." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then start by having breakfast with us." Margaret hesitated, but then, with a small sigh, removed her coat and sat at the table. Lily's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't object. Instead, she handed her grandmother a plate. A bridge had been built. For the first time in a long time, Margaret wasn't just a billionaire. She was just a woman, sitting at a kitchen table, sharing a meal with her granddaughter. As they ate, Margaret listened more than she spoke. She watched as Lily interacted with Nathan, how she giggled when he made silly faces, how she instinctively leaned toward Ethan when asking for more syrup. Small things, but things Margaret had never noticed before. After breakfast, Margaret lingered, watching as Lily and Nathan continued drawing. She turned to Ethan. "You really care about her, don't you?" Ethan met her gaze. "She's part of my family now," Margaret exhaled, nodding slowly. "Then I suppose I need to figure out how to be a part of that." Lily looked up. "You could come back tomorrow," she suggested hesitantly. "For dinner?" Margaret blinked. It was a simple offer, but it meant everything. She smiled softly. "I'd like that." Later that evening, Ethan sat with Lily on the couch, flipping through her sketchbook. She stopped on a page where she had drawn a small house with 3 figures standing in front of it: Ethan, Nathan, and herself. Ethan's throat tightened. "Is that us?" Lily nodded. "Yeah, it's home." For the first time, Lily had exactly what she had always wanted. A family that listened, a family that cared, a new beginning. The days following Margaret's visit were filled with a newfound rhythm, one that felt natural, unforced, and quietly fulfilling. Ethan found himself adjusting to a new reality, one where Lily was not just a temporary guest, but a permanent part of their home. Nathan had taken to her as though she had always been there, dragging her into his games, begging her to help him with schoolwork, and treating her like an older sister. Lily, in turn, had softened, no longer the wary girl who had stood outside Joe's coffee house that night. She was laughing more, sleeping better, drawing with joy rather than solitude. Yet, despite the warmth of their little world, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. And he was right. It happened on a cold Wednesday morning. Ethan was at work, steam hissing from the espresso machine as he filled an order. The cafe was unusually quiet, with only a few customers scattered around. The bell above the door jingled, and when Ethan looked up, he saw Margaret walking in, accompanied by a man in a crisp grey suit. Ethan tensed immediately. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out from behind the counter, meeting her halfway. "Margaret." His gaze flickered to the man beside her. "Who's this?" Margaret sighed, a rare moment of hesitation crossing her face. "This is Henry Wallace, my attorney." The weight of those words settled like a lead brick in Ethan's stomach. His fingers curled slightly at his sides. "An attorney?" Henry cleared his throat, adjusting his cuffs. "Mr. Carter, Miss Bennett asked me to assist in clarifying some legal matters regarding Lily's guardianship." Ethan exhaled sharply, jaw tightening. "Legal matters?" Margaret placed a hand on Henry's arm, signaling for him to wait. She turned back to Ethan. "I need you to understand something. I am not here to take her away." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Then what exactly are you here for?" Margaret hesitated before answering. "I want to make it official. If Lily is to live with you, I want her to have stability, legal stability." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You mean custody?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, full legal guardianship." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. He had expected a fight, another battle where he would have to prove that he could care for Lily. But this was her stepping aside. Henry spoke again, his voice professional but not unkind. "Miss Bennet has drawn up the paperwork to relinquish her full guardianship to you, provided you agree to a few conditions." Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms. "Conditions?" Margaret's voice softened. "Only that I remain in her life. I will not dictate how you raise her, but I would like to have scheduled visits, to be there for her." Ethan let out a slow breath, his chest tightening. This was it, the final step. He had fought for Lily's right to choose, and now she would. Be his daughter, not just in heart but in law. He ran a hand through his hair, then looked at Margaret. "Does Lily know about this?" Margaret shook her head. "I wanted to speak with you first." Ethan exhaled. "Then we ask her together." That evening the three of them sat at the kitchen table. Margaret looked oddly out of place in Ethan's humble apartment, but she had made no complaints. Lily sat between them, her small hands fidgeting in her lap. She sensed the tension, her gaze bouncing between Ethan and her grandmother. "What's going on?" Ethan took a steady breath and met her eyes. "Lily, your grandmother wants to make things official. She wants me to be your legal guardian." Lily's breath caught. "You mean, like my dad?" Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words. "If that's what you want." Lily's eyes flickered to Margaret, uncertainty flashing in them. "And you're okay with this?" Margaret smiled, a gentle sadness in her expression. "I am, as long as I still get to see you." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief, of closure, of finally knowing where she belonged. She turned back to Ethan and whispered, "Yes." Ethan's heart clenched, and for a moment all he could do was nod. "All right then." Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Then let's make it official." Lily watched as Ethan signed the papers, solidifying what they had already known deep down, that they were a family. When it was done, Ethan reached for Lily's hand. She gripped his fingers tightly, her hold small but sure. Margaret wiped the corner of her eye discreetly, then smiled at them both. "I think this calls for a celebration." Lily's face lit up. "Pancakes?" Ethan laughed. "Always pancakes." And with that, a new chapter truly began, not just for Lily, but for all of them. The morning after the papers were signed, the world outside Ethan's apartment felt the same, but inside, everything had changed. Lily was now, legally, part of his family. Yet, the weight of that truth didn't come with fear or uncertainty. It came with peace. Ethan stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while Nathan and Lily sat at the table, scribbling in their notebooks. The scene felt ordinary, yet extraordinary. He had never imagined himself as the guardian of a little girl who had once belonged to a completely different world. Yet here they were, together, unbreakable. Margaret had left after the signing the previous night, but not before making a quiet promise. She would give Lily space to grow, to love, and to find happiness in her new home, but she would always be nearby. Ethan had respected that. It was a compromise, a step toward healing. Later that afternoon, the three of them, Ethan, Lily, and Nathan, walked through the neighborhood park. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, the crisp air carrying the distant sound of children laughing. The golden hues of the setting sun painted the world in warm shades, and for the first time, Lily walked ahead without hesitation, without fear. She belonged. Lily kicked a stray pebble and looked up at Ethan. "So, does this mean I have to call you Dad?" Ethan's heart skipped, but he kept his voice light. "Only if you want to." Lily considered this, biting her lip. "I think I like calling you Ethan, but I know you're my family now." Ethan nodded. "That's what matters." Nathan suddenly tugged on Lily's sleeve. "Race you to the swings? A challenge. A real, normal, childlike challenge." Lily smirked. "You don't stand a chance." And just like that, she was off, running, laughing. Nathan chased after her, their giggles echoing through the park. Ethan watched them, arms crossed, his heart full in a way he had never expected. Nearby, Margaret sat on a bench watching as well. She had stayed true to her word. She had given them space, but she wasn't gone. She would always be there. She met Ethan's gaze, and for the first time, there was no tension, no challenge, just understanding. "You did a good thing," she said as he sat beside her. Ethan chuckled. "So did you." Margaret smiled, her gaze still on Lily. "I never knew how to love her properly," she admitted. "Not the way she needed. But you did." Ethan shook his head. "It wasn't just me, it was her choice too." Margaret sighed, but it wasn't sad. It was accepting. "I won't make the same mistake again. I'll be here for her, in whatever way she lets me." Ethan glanced at her, then back at Lily, who was swinging higher and higher, fearless, free. That's all she ever wanted. As the afternoon light began to fade, they started their walk back home. Lily held onto Nathan's hand, her laughter still lingering in the air. The comfort of routine had begun to settle in, homework after dinner, movie nights on Fridays, and pancakes on Sunday mornings. That night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she reached for his hand. "Do you think she'll really come visit?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, kid, I think she will." Lily let out a small sigh of relief and closed her eyes. "Okay." Ethan sat by her side for a moment longer, watching as her breathing evened out. The fear, the uncertainty, it had all faded away. Back in the living room, Margaret stood by the door, her coat draped over one arm. She looked around the apartment, small, cozy, filled with warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, empty mansion she would return to. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "About what?" Margaret glanced toward Lily's room. "Taking all this on. Becoming her father." Ethan let out a quiet chuckle. "Margaret, I became her father the moment she walked into my life." Margaret looked down for a moment, nodding slowly. "She's lucky to have you." Ethan's voice softened. "She's lucky to have you too, if you're ready to be what she needs." Margaret's lips pressed together, but this time it wasn't in resistance. It was in thought, in realization, in acceptance. She straightened her posture. "I'll be back next week. Maybe I'll bring something for her room." Ethan smirked. "Don't go overboard." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "No promises." As she left, Ethan let out a long breath, rubbing a hand over his face. They had come a long way. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was theirs to walk together. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the park. A family had been broken, reshaped, and rebuilt. It wasn't traditional, it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Months passed, and the cold grasp of winter slowly gave way to the first signs of spring. The world around them changed, but one thing remained constant. Lily had found a home. Ethan stood by the kitchen counter one Saturday morning, watching, as Nathan and Lily argued over the last pancake on the plate. "I made most of them," Nathan declared, crossing his arms. "I deserve it," Lily smirked. You burned half of them. Nathan gasped dramatically. Lies. Ethan chuckled and slid the pancake onto Lily's plate. They're settled. Nathan groaned while Lily stuck out her tongue in victory. It was normal. It was family. Margaret knocked on the door just as Ethan was refilling his coffee. She had become a regular presence in their lives, never overstepping but never distant either. It had taken time, but she had learned how to be present in Lily's life in a way that felt natural. "Good morning," she greeted as she stepped inside, taking in the warmth of the small apartment. She had stopped wearing her pristine business suits when she visited. Today, she was dressed casually, a soft blue cardigan replacing her usual structured blazers. It suited her. Lily ran over and hugged her grandmother, something that had once seemed impossible. Margaret smiled and gently ran her fingers through Lily's hair, a gesture of love she had struggled with before. As they sat down, Ethan cleared his throat. "So, we have some news." Margaret arched a brow. "Good or bad?" Lily beamed. "Good." Ethan placed an envelope in front of Margaret. She picked it up, her fingers delicate but firm as she pulled out the paper inside. As her eyes scanned the words, they widened slightly. "You're adopting her," Margaret whispered, her voice nearly catching. Ethan nodded. "She's already my daughter in every way that matters. It's time to make it official." Margaret exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. Then with a soft smile, she looked at Lily. "Is this what you want, my dear?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes." Margaret placed the paper down and reached for Ethan's hand across the table. A silent acknowledgement. A thank you. A moment of unity. The adoption ceremony was simple yet profound. Margaret stood beside them, watching with glistening eyes as Lily signed her new name. Lily Carter. Ethan crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You sure about this, kid?" Lily threw her arms around him. "I've never been more sure of anything." Nathan nudged her. "Welcome to the Carter family. It's chaotic, but you'll love it." Margaret let out a quiet laugh. "Yes, I think she already does." That evening, they returned home to a surprise. A small, neatly wrapped package sitting on the dining table. Margaret looked just a little nervous as she handed it to Lily. Lily unwrapped it carefully, revealing a framed sketch, a drawing Lily had made months ago, of a little girl standing between a man and a boy, holding their hands. Above them, the words were written in delicate cursive, "Home." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she clutched the frame to her chest. She looked at Margaret, who simply nodded, her own expression soft with emotion. "Thank you," Lily whispered. Margaret touched her cheek lightly. "No, my love. Thank you." That night, as Ethan sat by Lily's bedside, she reached for his hand. "Hey, Ethan." "Yeah, kid." She hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe one day. I'll call you Dad." Ethan's throat tightened, but he just squeezed her hand. "Whenever you're ready." Lily closed her eyes, her breathing soft and even. She was safe, she was loved, and she was home. Epilogue. 1 year later, the seasons had come and gone, and with them, life had continued to unfold in ways none of them could have anticipated. One bright spring afternoon, Margaret sat in the park, watching Lily push Nathan on the swings. She had become a fixture in their lives, no longer an outsider peering in, but a part of something real, something she never thought she would have. Again, Ethan walked up, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to her. "You ever think about how far we've come?" Margaret chuckled, taking a sip. "Every single day." She turned her gaze toward Lily, who was now laughing as Nathan dramatically flopped off the swing into the grass. "She's happy, Ethan. Truly happy." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, and so am I." Margaret glanced at him, her lips curling into a soft smile. Me too. At that moment, Lily ran up breathless and smiling. Grandma, Ethan, come play with us. Margaret raised an amused eyebrow. You expect me to get on a swing at my age? Lily grinned. I expect you to try. Ethan stood and held out a hand to Margaret. Come on, let's not keep her waiting. With a shake of her head and a rare, genuine laugh, Margaret let herself be pulled toward the swings, toward her granddaughter, toward a future that once seemed impossible. As laughter filled the air, it was clear. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about love. It was about choice. And they had all chosen each other. Before we dive deeper into this heartwarming journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and tell me, are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York? A cozy home in the countryside? Or maybe somewhere completely unexpected? Thank you for watching. I truly appreciate you for spending your time with this story. Your support, your comments, and your engagement mean everything. Whether you're here for the emotional journey, the unexpected twists, or simply to enjoy a good story, you are part of this storytelling adventure. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss what happens next. Once again, thank you for being here. Keep believing in the power of stories, in the beauty of second chances, and in the magic of family. See you in the next chapter.